Yeah, there we go. Welcome back to another thrilling installment of Free Read Fridays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fraggeth, and today we're going to be reading more of The Ascension Factor by Frank Herbert and Bill Ransom. Why Frank Herbert is listed first when he was dead when this was published is anybody's guess, but there you have it. It's name recognition appeal, I guess. So previously on, we have started rocketing into the air. Oh no, did I not? Did I misplace my bookmark? Oh, that could be an issue. Oh, okay, there it is. It's just buried really well. Jeez Louise. Okay, so previously on, we've gotten some perspective sections from Spider Nevi, who is director Raja Flattery's wet work guy, his murder person, his fixer, and Spider Nevi is in pursuit of Ben Ozette and Crista Gali's group, and they're stuck right now, held underwater by the kelp in a foil, and he's kind of concerned because the guy he's had with him, who he's basically setting up as a sacrificial pawn, named Zentz, who's one of the heads of security, I think, for Flattery. He's not terribly important, I regret to say. Has vanished. That Zentz has vanished, and Nevi doesn't actually know where he is. So he's a bit concerned. Meanwhile, up in orbit, Beatriz Tatoosh has been well and truly captured and outmaneuvered by Mr. Brood. Captain Brood? I don't remember his rank. Anyway, he's one of the security goons, and he is a man of some ambition. And he is basically planning on hijacking the ship that's been constructed right out from under Raja Flattery. To do this, he's got Beatriz Tatoosh under his thumb. He's doing broadcasts to make it look like everything's totally peachy, creamy, keen, and normal and fine. And meanwhile, he's killing off everybody in his way. He has murdered a lot of people at this point. Even just in the time frame that we've known him, he's killed, I don't know, or has been around and engendered the killing of, like 10 people at least. Minimum 10 people that we know of. Probably more. It's implied that he has been instrumental in the killing of lots of other people. He's not a good person, is what I'm saying. He's a bad man. And Beatriz Tatoosh is stuck with him. Now, Dwarf MacIntosh does not, in fact, know that there's a problem on the station. Yet. He'll get there. He's real close to finding out. He doesn't know that the station's, the orbital station's security personnel have all been disposed of and replaced. He doesn't know that Beatriz Tatoosh is captive with a murderous, ambitious sociopath. He has figured out that the kelp is doing something interesting down below, because this is where kelp control is as well, and thinks that the kelp is surrounding Crista Gali because of the way the energy and electricity patterns and current flows are moving, among other things. He happens to be dead right about that. Then he's like, well, okay, I'm going to find Beatriz Tatoosh because she hasn't shown up yet and she should be here. I don't know where she is. Is his thinking, and he's gonna try and do something about it. We haven't really heard much from Raj Flattery at this point. He's dealing with his own problems. Resistance against Raj Flattery continues, which is good. Resist your tyrants. Okay, there we go. I think that about does it. I am getting increasingly concerned that I'm not going to be able to show off all the cover art that I have acquired for this one. I may start doing more than one per, or if worst comes to worst, on the last installment, I'll just have a slideshow of all the ones that I've got. There's quite a few of them. Some multilingual ones. Anyway, that I think is where we will call it for my yabbering, and we'll get right down to it. I can say truthfully that there will not be further ado before we start a-doing. That's the wrong button.
Consciousness manifests itself indubitably in man, and therefore, glimpsed in this one flash of light, it reveals itself as having a cosmic extension, and consequently as being aureoled by limitless prolongations in space and time. Pierre Teilhard Desjardins, Hymn of the Universe. The immensity smelled trouble on the waters, a great disturbance from one of the coastal stands. It had been a struggle, the debris told that tale. Currents had changed suddenly, bringing the strange sense of fear and, just as suddenly, bliss. So far, the currents hadn't changed back. The little whiff of death that the immensity caught on the current was human, not kelp. Perhaps the pruner has become pruned, it thought. It stretched its outermost fronds coastward, but still could not contact the neighboring stand. Only fragments of messages drifted in on bits of torn fronds. These were shards, frames, pieces of recordings, not the oneness that the immensity sought, not this talk that humans enjoyed and withheld from others. Then came the humans. They set into the immensity from above, like highlighters reversing their lives, and with them they brought splinters of dreams from the stand next door. Yes, Her Holiness was among the kelp again at last. Her presence suddenly freed the neighboring stand of prisoner kelp, a stand that had lost her to Flattery's butchery 5 cycles back. Who are these others now come to my stand? Few humans fished outside their gridwork. The few organic islands left to risk afloat on Pandora's seas likewise stayed to the more merciful currents of the grid. The immensity had spared fishermen, scouts, humans fleeing humans, and it had spared entire island cities more than once. The human in charge of humans had not shown the immensity equal compassion. Though humans often called them willy-nillys, the islands floated now in predictable patterns. Current control, the enslaver of the kelp, ensured this. But the volcanics of the past 25 cycles had conjured storms the like of which the immensity had never seen in its own time, and these storms brought islands into its reach. It thought of the organic islands as immensities of humans, and adjusted its own greatness to let them pass. These humans came in their flying creature, dropping pieces of kelp into the immensity's lagoon. The immensity unraveled a long vine from the wall of the lagoon and sniffed the human. The scents talked of fear and death, and to have the whole story, the immensity would have to read this human's tissues bit by bit. It waited until the human finished discharging the pieces of kelp, so that the immensity would know as much of its neighbor as it could. It knew now, by scent and touch, that this was Audi Zent's human, As it gripped Audi Zent's human at the waist and pulled him into the walls of the lacuna, it knew that this human had killed many humans, as many as a storm and perhaps more. The immensity had spent most of its awakened time trying to communicate with other kelp, to merge with other, smaller stands. More kelp was better, it thought. Closer was better. It failed to understand creatures that killed their own kind. These were, indeed, diseased individuals. If they were merciless to their own, they would certainly show no mercy to others. The immensity concluded that it should respond in kind.
We islanders understand current and flow. We understand that conditions and times change. To change, then, is normal. Ward Keel, The Notebooks. Beatriz knew that it would not be in the captain's best interest to kill Mac, especially if there were links with other forces groundside. But she had also quit trying to guess what could be in Captain Brood's best interest. From what she could gather, Captain Brood was a man trying to capitalize on a bad decision, making more bad decisions to cover his tracks. He wouldn't last long at this rate, and he was the type who just might take everyone and everything with him. She concentrated on the map she'd called up on the large studio display screen. It was a map of Pandora, rotatable, and at the touch of a key it highlighted populated areas, agriculture, fishing, and mining. She could tell at a glance where the factories lay, both topside and undersea, and where the wretched communities lived that served them, for serve them they did. Only today, with the murders of her crew and Ben's warnings ringing in her memory, did she realize how the people of Pandora, including herself, had become one with their chains. They were enslaved by hunger, and by the manipulation of hunger, which was a particular skill of the director. He concentrated on food, transportation, and propaganda. Before her, on Holovision's giant screen, she saw the geography of hunger spread out for her at a touch. The largest single factory complex above or below the sea was Catalogued, feeding the bottomless maw of Flattery's Project Void ship. It showed up on her display as a small black bullseye in the center of amoeba-like ripples of blue and yellow. Those ripples represented the settlement. The blue was Catalogued proper, where all paths led to the ferry terminal or to the line. People inside the blue lived in barracks-like tenements or in remnants of islanders' bubbly stuck to the shore. The yellow, a weak stain of sorts widening out from the blue, represented the local refugee population. Starving, unsheltered, too weak for heavy work, they were also too weak to rebel. The director's staff rode among them daily, picking the lucky few who would be trucked to town to wash down the stone pavements, sort rock from dung in the director's gardens, or pick through refuse for reusable materials. For this, each was given a space in the line and a few crumbs at one end of 100 food dispensaries that Flattery operated in the area. Even private markets were offshoots of the dispensaries. True black market vendors disappeared with chilling regularity. The sphere of Catalogued included the bay and its launch base, the factory ship, the village, Flattery's preserve, and the huddle of misshapen humanity that squeezed inside the perimeter for protection from Pandora's demons. Outside this sphere, Beatriz noted the similarities of other settlements along the coastline. These smaller dots also were ringed by the huddle of the poor, even agricultural settlements, fishing villages, the traditional sources of food. Security squads shot looters of fields, proprietors of illegal window boxes and rooftop gardens. They shot the occasional fisherman bold enough to set an unlicensed line. All of this Ben had told her. She had seen the evidence herself and had chosen to disbelieve.
Beatriz earned her food coupons fairly, ate well, felt guilty enough about the hunger around her to believe what flattery had fed her about production meaning jobs and jobs feeding people. For almost 2 years her assignments had covered jobs, the people who worked them, and the people who gave them out. It had been a long time since she'd walked the muddy streets of hunger. There aren't any new jobs lately, she thought, but there sure are a lot fewer people. Now she was above it all, trapped and converted, with nothing to offer and everything to fear. Thou shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. Christian Book of the Dead. Boggs had been hungry all his 20 years, but today his hunger was different, and he knew it. He woke up without pain in his bones from the ground underneath, and when he scratched his head, a handful of hair came with it. This, he knew, was not hunger, but the end of hunger. He looked around him at the still, wizened forms of his family huddled together under their rock ledge. Today he would get them food or die trying, because he knew he would do the dying anyway. Boggs was born with a split lip, gaping nose slit, and stump feet, characteristic of his father's family. His 6 brothers shared these defects, but only 2 still lived. His father, too, was dead. Like Boggs, they had known the enemy hunger from birth. His malformed mouth had made nursing a futile noise, so most of the sucking that he did as a newborn slobbered down his chin. His mother tried to salvage what she could with her fingers, slopping it back into the cleft of his mouth. He'd watched her do this countless times with his younger brothers. A week ago, he'd watched her try to nurse the starving 10-year-old when there wasn't even a bug to catch. She had been dry for 2 years, and his brother died, clutching a handful of fallen orange hair. Boggs looked again at the fistful of orange hair in his hand, then weakly cast it away. "I will take the line, Mother," he said, in the lilting islander way. "I will bring us back a fine Muri." "You will not go." Her voice was dry, hoarse, and filled the tiny space they'd dug out under the ledge. "You are not licensed to fish. They will kill you. They will take the line." His father had begged the local security detachment for a license. Everyone knew that many temporaries were issued every day, and that some could even pay with a share of the catch. But the director issued a fixed number each day. Conservation, he called it. Otherwise, the people will outfish the resource and no one will eat. Conservation, Boggs snorted to himself. He eyed the fish line wrapped around his mother's ankle. There were 2 bright hooks attached. There had been a fiber sack for bait, but they'd eaten the sack weeks ago. There was just the 10 meters of synthetic line and the 2 metal hooks tucked inside the wrap. Boggs crawled up beside his mother so that his face was even with hers. She had the wide-set eye sockets of her mother, and the same bulging blue eyes. Now a faint film obscured the blue. Boggs pulled at his hair again and thrust the scraggly clump where she could see it. "You know what this means," he said. The crawl, the effort at talk exhausted him, but somehow he kept on. "I'm done for." He tugged at her hair, and it, too, came out in a clump. "You are, too. Look here." Her bleared eyes slowly tracked on the evidence that she didn't need, and she nodded. "Take it," was all she said. She bent her knee up to her skinny chest, and Boggs clumsily unwound the line from around her ankle. He crawled out from under the ledge, and as far as he could see down to the shore, others were crawling out of holes, out from under pieces of cloth and rubbish. Here and there a wisp of smoke dared to breach the air. Boggs found his cane, propped himself upright, and stumped his way slowly toward the water. He'd thought himself too skinny to sweat, but sweat poured out of him nonetheless. It was a cold sweat at first, but the effort of picking his way through the rubbish and the dying warmed him up. A small jetty shouldered the oncoming tide. It was an amalgam of blasted rock, about 20 meters long and 5 or 6 meters wide. The quarter tide change tossed a few breakers over the black rock, soaking the dozen licensed fishermen who hunched against the spray. It took Boggs over a half-hour to make it the 100 meters from the ledge to the base of the jetty. His vision was failing, but he scanned the tidelands for signs of the security patrol. "Demon patrol," he muttered. Vachon Security sent regular patrols through refugee areas. Their stated purpose was to protect the people against hooded dashers and, lately, the terrifying boils of nerve runners that raced up from the south. Boggs shuddered. He had seen a boil of runners attack a family last season, entering through their eyes to clutch their slimy eggs inside their skulls. He had thought the family too weak to scream, but he was wrong. It was not a pretty sight, and the patrol took their sweet time burning them out. Everyone knew security's real reason for patrolling the beach. It was to keep the people from feeding themselves. The director passed rumors of black market fishing harvests that he said threatened the economy of Pandora. Boggs hadn't seen sign of these harvests yet, nor had he seen any sign of an economy. His mother's tiny radio taught him the word, but to him it would always be just a word. A pyre smoldered to his left. 3 small clumps of char lay atop a ring of rock, slightly higher than high tide. The poor couldn't even muster enough fuel to burn their dead. When enough of them accumulated, the security guards amused themselves by flaming them with gush guns. They called it nerve runner practice. Someone guarded the pyre on the other side of the rocks, and when Boggs edged closer, he could see that it was Silva. He stopped and caught his breath. Silva was a girl his own age, and the rumors said that she had killed her younger sisters and brother while they slept. No one raised a hand against her now as she tended their pitiful fire. Boggs hoped she wouldn't see him. He needed bait, but he knew he couldn't fight for it. He got down on all fours and crawled to the edge of the heap. He reached a hand up, felt around the hot rocks until he touched something that didn't feel like a rock. He jerked harder, and something came off in his hand. It was hot and peeling on one side, cold on the other. He couldn't bring himself to look. He just grabbed his cane and scuttled away. Silva hadn't seen him. "I'll bring her a fish," he promised himself. "I'll catch fish for Mother and the boys, and one for Silva." The quarter-tide patrol was nowhere to be seen. "They've gone through already," he thought. "They've gone through and checked the licenses, and now they're up on the beach, checking for caches in the rocks." Boggs stood apart from the other fishermen. They might turn him in because he was catching fish that were rightfully theirs. They might steal his fish and line, and beat him as they had beaten his father once. "But they'll wait until I have the fish," he thought. "That's what I'd do." He hunkered down against the jetty so that he was barely visible from the shore, tied a rock onto his line, and baited the hooks from the charred mess he clasped in his fist. "It's bait," he reminded himself. "It's just bait." He didn't have enough energy to plunk his bait out very far, so he left it on the bottom about half a dozen meters from the rocks. It was deep there, deep enough to take most of his line. He gave a tug now and then to make sure it was free. There was enough bait for 2, possibly 3 more tries. "You got a license, boy?" The gruff voice behind him startled him, but he was too weak to move. He didn't say anything. "You're late getting out here if you got a license. You only get 1 day. Can't afford to waste it." Some rocks clacked together as the man stepped down to where Boggs sat wedged into a cleft. He was skinny and sallow, with a wisp of beard on his chin and no hair on his head. The skin on the top of his head was peeling and sores dotted his face. "I'm an illegal too," the old man said. "Figured it was my last chance. You?" "Same." He reached across Boggs, fingered the bait, and put it down with a grunt. "Same as me." The voice was lower than illegal. It was ashamed. Suddenly, Boggs' line went tight, then tighter. Then it nearly jerked his arms out of their sockets. "You got one, boy," the old man said. In his excitement, his voice rose and his cracked lips got wet. "You sure got one, boy. I'll help." "No!" Boggs wrapped the line around his wrist and levered it in about a meter. "No, it's mine." Whatever it was big and strong enough that it didn't have to surface to fight. But Boggs kept making slow progress, levering the stubs of his feet against a boulder and putting his skinny back into the pull. He figured he had about 2 meters to go, but he couldn't see anything for the black spots swimming across his eyes. He heard the old man grunt in surprise and scramble up the rocks behind him, and when he had nothing left to pull with, Boggs just lay there, wedged in the rock, the excess line tangled around both arms. The water broke with a rush in front of him, and whatever he had hooked lunged for him and caught him by the ankles. The grip was firm and human. It laughed. "Hey, you caught a big one, boy!" it bellowed. "Can you show me your license?" Another laugh. Oh, no, it was the other guy already. Never mind. "You caught a big one, boy!" it bellowed. "Can you show me your license?" Another laugh. Are you... "Security?" the voice asked, pulling him closer to the water, cutting his skinny buttocks on the rocks. "You bet your ass, boy. Let's see that license." Oh, no, it's another guy entirely. I don't know where the other dude went. Maybe it is the same guy, I don't know. Hand over hand, the security pulled Boggs closer. Face to face, Boggs could see the breathing device dangling from his dive suit, and the black hair draining over his bulging forehead. "You ain't got one, do you?" He picked Boggs up and gave him a shake. Every bone in his dried-up body rattled. "Do you?" No, I... "Stealing food from people's mouths? You think you have the right to decide who'll live and who'll die? Only the director has that right. Well, fishbait, I'll show you where the big ones are." With that, the man stuck his mouthpiece between his lips, pinned the boy's arms against his chest, and fell backward with him into the sea. Boggs coughed once at the tickle of water in his nose, then choked as it exploded into his frail lungs. He saw nothing but light overhead, where it fanned out from the surface, and the bubbles from his mouth where they joined it like a blossom to its stem. It was a different character. Scuba Steve, we'll call him. Scuba Steve just jumped this poor man, and is now drowning him. "Kill, therefore, with the sword of wisdom, the doubt born of ignorance that..." Oh, okay. "Kill, therefore, with the sword of wisdom, the doubt born of ignorance that lies in your heart. Be one in self-harmony, and arise, great warrior, arise." From Zavatan Conversations with the Avata, Queets Twisp, Elder. A silent Twisp and muttering Mose gathered the spore dust of the two fulfilled highlighters into their bags and trudged their loads to the high reaches. Twisp had spent little time with the monks lately, but they were generally an unsuspicious lot who seemed accustomed to his comings and goings. Few of them knew of his work with the Few of them knew of his work with the shadows, though if others knew, he was certain they would not interfere. The carnage below would not reach them. Experience had taught him this. Twisp tossed back his mantle, tucked up his sleeves, and enjoyed his foray into the sun. For these few hours, at least, he could put aside the messages and codes and other accoutrements of his secret life. Today he might be called on to make a decision or give an order that might change Pandora forever. Until that hour, he wanted to feel Pandora's sunlight and the feminine breezes of the high reaches. He and Mose sweated in the spore dust gathering, and sweat plastered the fine blue dust to their hot skins. The soul of Avata, bound up in the dust, leaked its way into his pores. Twisp's body picked its way up the trail, oblivious to the way his mind raced the kelp ways of the past. He who controls the present controls the past, a voice in his mind told him, and he who controls the past controls the future. It was something he'd read in the histories, but he'd also heard it before from the invisible mouth of the kelp. Avada controls the past, he thought. It maps the voyage of our past, our genetic past, which helps us to plot a true course for our future. He watched his feet fall, one in front of the other, without the expense of thought. They stepped over sharp stones, sidestepped a flat wing, all without interference from what most people called the mind. It was as if he were a being watching another being, but from within. Cheap entertainment, he thought, and smiled. Mose hummed a tune behind him, one that Twisp did not recognize. He wondered where the young monk's mind voyaged to bring him such a tune. He had too much respect for another man's reverie to ask him. Each contact with the kelp or the spore dust had taken Twisp deeper into the details of humanity and deeper into his own past. Yes, the loss of a love was painful, and it seemed no less painful replayed. Most of these memories exhilarated him, like the one of nuzzling his mother's breast for the first time, the taste of the sweet milk and the coo of her voice over him, in the background the swish swoosh of her islander heart. Twice the kelp had taken him further than that, into the past of his ancestors, into the void from which humanity itself had sprung. Twisp acquired something more than a history lesson on these voyages. He acquired wisdom, the insight of sages, a separateness from the worldly machinations of people like Flattery. This was why the director eventually discouraged, then finally forbade, the kelp ritual. Do you want your children to know your most secret thoughts, your desires, all those dreams you couldn't tell them? He would ask. This warned Twisp far more about Flattery's depth of paranoia than it did of the dangers of the kelp. Flattery successfully discouraged most Pandorans, at least the ones dependent on his settlements and his handouts. His isolation of a kelp neurotoxin made the people even more cautious. His development of an antidote became popular, since contact with the kelp was virtually unavoidable in many traditional professions. It could have been a placebo, Twisp thought. What people expect the kelp to do to their minds is pretty much what occurs. What people expect the kelp to do to their minds is pretty much what occurs. The brief Pandoran ritual of giving their dead up to the kelp had been all but abandoned. Now the dead were burned, their memories dissipated with smoke to the winds. This Flattery encouraged with his simple plea for hygiene. Decomposing bodies watch up on the beaches, he said. What little tideland we have stinks with the remains of our dead. Twisp Twisp shook his head to clear it of flattery, of the man's grating, nasal voice and supercilious manner. This was not the voyage he wished the dust to lead him down. He sought the deeper currents of history to address the problems of flattery and hunger. "Humans have enslaved humans for all time," he said to himself. "A new galaxy shouldn't require a new solution." How had ancient humans broken the bonds of human-inflicted hunger? With death, a voice in his mind told him. Death freed the afflicted, or death freed them from the afflictor. Twisp wanted the Pandorans to be better than that. Flattery's way was starvation, assassination, pitting cousin against cousin. The footprints Twisp sought in the dust must lead away from flattery, not after him. "What good does it do for me to become him? We trade a long-armed murderer for a tall one." By the time he and Mose lay their burdens down before the monks of the Highlighter clan, Twisp felt no need for the ritual. He already swam in the heady seas of kelp memories. His mind waged a reluctant struggle against the babbling current. The people around him babbled as they prepared the dust. Twisp made his mouth beg his leave, and he perched atop his favorite outcrop, alone. Behind him, other elders walked a line of kneeling Zavatans and spooned little heaps of blue dust onto outstretched tongues. They proceeded with water drums and chants, songs from Earth, from ship, from their centuries of voyaging across Pandora and her seas. This was where communicants met the dead, here in the aftermath of the blue dust. They traveled backward in time, raveling up memories that had been long forgotten. Some witnessed their parents' lives, or their grandparents'. A few, one or two, branched off into the greater memory of humanity itself, and these were the ones consulted for movement toward a rightness of being. Twisp let the syncopated water drum lull him back to that first day he had felt the effects of the new kelp. 25 years ago he first touched land, a prisoner of Gelar Gallo. That was the day he and a few friends defeated Gallo's vicious guerrilla movement and ended a civil war. It was the day the Hybe tanks splashed down from orbit and brought them flattery. It all happened atop a peak that the Pandorans now called Mount Avata, in honor of the kelp's role in their salvation. He had waited there for what he had expected to be his death at the hands of Gallo, the merman guerrilla leader. The kelp brought him a vision, then, of a bearded carpenter named Noah. Noah was blind, and mistook Twisp for his grandson, Abimael. He fed the hungry Twisp a sweet cake, and down all the years since then Twisp had remembered the fine taste of that sticky, sweet cake. "Go to the records and look up the histories," Noah told him. Twisp had done just that, and it left him in awe of Noah, the kelp, and that sunny day on the mount. "This new ark of ours is out on dry land once and for all," Noah told him. "We're going to leave the sea." Twisp had avoided the kelp since then, thinking only that he needed to let the affairs of Pandora go to the Pandorans, and the affairs of Twisp to Twisp. Then the director insinuated himself into the lives of the people. Their lives became Twisp's life, their pain his pain. Twisp had studied well, read widely in the histories, and like any islander, he brought the hungry into his home. That home grew as the hunger grew into 2 homes, 3 homes, a settlement. Differences with the director drove them to their perch in the high reaches, and to secretly make fertile the rocky plains up coast, away from Flattery's henchmen. Now, in the grip of the spore dust, Twisp saw the intricacy of what he'd wrought, and the strength. A small voice came to him as the dust was distributed to others. It was a voice of the world of Noah, one that he had never expected to hear, even within his own mind.
Fight hunger with food, it told him. Fight darkness with light, illusion with illumination.
It was a tiny voice, nearly a whisper. "Abimael," he said, "you are here at last. How did you find me?"
"The scent of the sweet cake," Abimael said, "and the strong call of a good heart."
Twisp swept past Abimael in the headlong tumble down the kelpways of his mind. He was out of the fronds now, out of the peripheral vines, and into the main stem of kelp. "This highlighter must have come from a grandfather's stand," he thought. "It's a wonder that they still escape Flattery's shears."
"It is not wonder, elder, but illusion."
The voice that Twisp heard was not from inside. He turned slowly, remembering the young Mose. It was then that he noticed Mose's hand on his arm. "You travel this vine too, my cousin?"
"I do."
At no time did Mose move his lips. His pupils dilated and constricted wildly, and Twisp knew that his own did likewise. He had looked into a mirror once after taking the dust and fallen into places he'd rather not remember.
"I remember them,"
Mose began. Twisp interrupted him, concentrating only on what Mose said of illusion. This interruption, too, was spoken without lips. "You said illusion," Twisp reminded him. "What has the kelp shown you of illusion?"
"It is a language this highlighter spoke when it grew on the vine," Mose said. "It learned to cast illusion like a hologram. Elder, if you follow the vine of this thought to its root, you will know the power of illusion."
Suddenly, Twisp's mind cartwheeled deeper into itself. "No," he thought, "not deeper into my mind. Not deeper into my mind. Deeper into Avada's."
"Yes, this way," a soft voice coaxed.
Twisp looked back on his body as though from a great height, incurious about the shell of himself. Then he turned onward into the void. "What is illusion? What is real?" he asked.
"What is a map?" the voice replied. "Is it illusion or is it real?"
"Both," he thought. "It is both real, something that can be held and felt, and illusion, or symbol, or representation. The map is not the territory."
"You, fisherman, if you want to build a boat, what do you do first?"
"Draw a plan," he thought.
"And the plan is not the boat, but it is real. It is a real plan. What do you do next?"
Visions of all the boats he had built, or fished on, or coveted, floated through his mind. Next. He tried to concentrate, tried to remember where it was that Avada was leading him.
"Don't think about that," the voice chided. "After the plan, what next?"
"Build a model," he thought.
"It, too, is not the boat. It is a model. It is illusion. It is symbol. And it is real. If you would get a man to live a certain way, how might you do that?"
"Give him a model of behavior?"
"Perhaps."
"Map out his life?"
"Perhaps."
A moment of silence, and Twisp detected the distinct pulse of the sea in the pause. The voice went on.
"But a map, a model, these have a basic limitation. What is this limitation?"
Twisp felt his mind bursting at its seams. Avada was force-feeding him something important. If he could only grasp size. Whether it came to him intuitively, or whether the kelp provided him with the answer, the effect was the same. It's size. You can never know truly from a model how it will feel because you can't live in it. You can't try it on for size. He felt an immense sigh inside himself.
Exactly, friend Twisp. But if you could make the illusion life-size, the lesson, too, would be life-size, would it not? Suddenly he was thrust back in his spore-dust memory, and saw the old Pandora through the eyes of one of his bloodied ancestors fighting the Clone Wars. He saw the immensity of ship blacken out the sky, and heard that final message ring in his mind. "Surprise me, holy void!" Ship's voice was not the electronic monotone he'd expected. Its voice was relieved, even gleeful, as it made its farewell pass across both suns and disappeared without a sound. It sounded much like the voice he'd been hearing inside his own head. "Ship unburdened itself of us when it headed out for the holy void," Twisp whispered to himself. "To live our fullest potential, we have to learn how to unburden ourselves of ourselves." One more thing nagged at the back of his mind. He didn't know whether he said it aloud or not, but he knew that Mose, at least, heard him out. "We have to learn to cast illusion like a spell," Twisp heard himself say. "To capture an enemy without inflicting harm will take a carefully spun illusion." Somewhere in his mind he thought he detected a grunt of approval. "We islanders understand current and flow. We understand that conditions and times change. To change, then, is normal." Ward Keel, The Apocryphal Notebooks. Which is only different than the one we read before by, I think, saying apocryphal next to notebooks. Let me double check here. I don't know if that's a misprint or... "We islanders understand current and flow. We understand that conditions and times change. To change, then, is normal." Yeah, I think that the quote is supposed to be a bit different, but... Anyway. The quote is the same. This one just says the apocryphal notebooks instead of just the notebooks. Newsbreak should air within the hour, but Beatriz knew that this team would not make their deadline. They were having some kind of transmission problem that they refused to share with her, but she saw the results on her screens. Whenever their tape was ready for its burst groundside, a review showed that it had been tampered with. Someone seemed to be editing the editors. It was just as well. Leon told her that the short clip she prepared on the OMC would not be transmitted groundside for approval anyway. She recalled an incident several years ago when current control was still under sea in a merman compound. They were taping one of Flattery's spiritual hours, a propagandistic little chat with the people of Pandora. All went well until transmission time. "The kelp interfered. That was the only answer at the time, and an unpopular one. The kelp jammed broadcasts, made deletions on tapes." The hair on her neck prickled at the thought. She remembered how, finally, it edited tapes and changed the chronology of broadcasts, flipped images and voiceover around to make Flattery look like a fool, and make the broadcast adhere more closely to the truth. "Mac and I wired a lot of kelp fiber into this system," she thought. Any delay suited Beatriz just fine. She needed more time to figure out how to stay on the air. What? She needed more time to figure out how to stay on the air what wasn't in the script without getting herself and others killed. Okay, I'll just read it as written. Something about it seems wrong to me, but my brain might not be right now. She needed more time to figure out how to say on the air what wasn't... Oh my gosh, that's why. My brain was like putting the meaning of the back half of the sentence to the front half. She needed more time to figure out how to say on the air what wasn't in the script without getting herself and others killed. They would only trust her with a token appearance. She would have to make the most of it when the time came. Most Pandorans, even the poor, listened in on radio. She wanted to reach them all. She hoped it wasn't just hysteria that told her the kelp was on her side. If there's a coup in progress, who's at the bottom of it? She wondered. She ticked off the likely suspects, any of several board members of Merman Mercantile, the Shadows, Displaced Islanders, Brood, probably acting for someone else from Vashon's security forces. Or maybe the Zavatans, she thought, though she knew it was not their drift. Their response to political trouble was to dig in deeper, to flee further into the high reaches or the formidable upcoast regions. Brood's an opportunist, she thought. The killings at the launch site were a mistake, and he's trying to make the best of it. If there is an organized coup, he'll wait and throw in with whoever seems to be winning. Beatriz realized that Flattery had no friends, and damned few allies. Everyone had good reason for hating him. He had come to Pandora sporting his savior's cap when the very planet had turned on them, and then he turned on them. I am your chaplain psychiatrist, he told them. I can restructure your world, and I can save you all. Your children deserve better than this. Why did everyone believe him? Her years at Holovision gave her the answer. He was on the air daily, either in person or via his motivational series, a collection of tapes that she had not seen as propagandistic until now. She had even helped to produce several, including her recent upbeat series on the Void Ship. Everyone believed him because Flattery kept them too busy to do otherwise. Flattery had become the most formidable demon in a world of demons. Only he was human. Worse yet, he was pure human, without any of the kelp genes and other genetic tinkerings that Pandorans had to endure. Beatriz knew this now. He did it with their help, with her help. Though trapped, she felt an exhilaration at the notion that Brood's men couldn't shoot a clear signal groundside. They might need her yet. If I do this show as written, I'll be helping him again. She realized what it was she was helping Flattery to do. She wasn't helping him rescue a world in geological and social flux. She wasn't helping him resettle the homeless islanders whose organic cities broke up on the rocks of the new continents, or rescue mermen whose undersea settlements had broken like crackers at the recent buckling of the ocean floor. I'm helping him escape, she thought. He's not building this tin egg to explore the nearby stars. It's his personal lifeboat. She cursed under her breath and fisted the console in front of her, but gently, gently. She might need it later. The reflection that bounced back from her screen was of a woman she didn't recognize. The hair color was black, cropped and shaggy like her own, but the haunted brown eyes of her reflection stared out of bloodshot sclera, surrounded by two dark hollows that frightened her. Her nose was red and her complexion pasty for one so dark. Out of reflex, she reached for a comm line to call Nefertiti to make up, then stopped. Nefertiti would never brush her hair again, never again whisper in her ear at the countdown, "You're gorgeous, Bee! Knock 'em out!" She fisted the console again in despair. Leon glanced her way, but busied himself trying to iron out the glitch with transmissions to the groundside studio. He and his men were unfamiliar with the 0G of the orbiter's axis, and every small task that required movement seemed to anger them more. Beatriz knew her performance as written would be helping Brood, too, and this was more than she could bear. He was overseeing the delivery of the OMC to its crypt aboard the Void Ship, and mercifully out of her sight. If Leon didn't get past the jamming influence on their burst channel, Brood would be back, and he would be mad. She didn't relish the thought of Brood in a tantrum. Dwarf MacIntosh was a normal human, a blue-eyed clone from Hybe, and Beatriz was a near-normal islander. Mutations had leveled off over the past few generations, and most islanders, though shorter and darker, appeared as normal as MacIntosh and Flattery. Appearances among Pandorans had dictated their lives from the start. Flattery's not normal, she thought. His mind is a mutation, an abomination. Humans should not trample their own kind. She knew the history of slavery Earthside, and members of her own family had lived with the aftermath of the genetic slavery of Jesus Lewis. Today she had awakened at last to Ben's accusations that Flattery had enslaved Pandora, mermen and islanders alike, and his grip only got tighter while the people got hungrier. The past 25 years had been a cumulative string of disasters planet-wide. The sea bottom had fractured along a kelp root line to form the first strip of land. More such fractures followed, always along the gigantic roots of kelp beds. The consequent upheavals destroyed dozens of merman settlements down under, and caused the sinking or deliberate grounding of most of the floating organic cities of the islanders, her own among them. Refugees swarmed to the primitive coastal settlements by the thousands, forced to learn to survive again on land after nearly 3 centuries on or under the sea. Flattery had not eased their burden, only added to it.
"This whole planet's trying to kill us,"
Mac had told her the first time they talked.
"We don't need to give it a hand."
But Mac took no action against Flattery. He put all of his waking hours and a good number of his dreaming hours into perfecting the orbiter station as a jump-off point to the stars. He did this while directing current control and becoming the world's expert on its most mysterious resident, the kelp. He worked backward to define his priorities.
"We need current control," he said. "The kelp is fascinating, but reality dictates that we get supplies through it or people die. Controlling the kelp makes this project easier. It makes the settlement life easier. It guarantees results."
That was when he invented the Gridmaster.
The Gridmaster.
That was when he invented the Gridmaster, which bypassed the undersea multi-building complex of the merman's current control and allowed the major grid system to be operated from orbit. The merman complex undersea had sustained heavy damage, but it still carried the hardware and installed new grids. With the Gridmaster in operation, one person could handle all of the kelpways in the richest of Pandora's hemispheres. Beatriz had stood at Mac's side 2 years ago as his special guest the day the Gridmaster went online. Though officially a Holovision correspondent for the event, Beatriz liked to believe that there had been more to Mac's invitation than the business at hand. The spark of his blue eyes lit unmistakably in her presence, and they had enjoyed long talks flowing through the axis of the orbiter nights and reclining in the webworks. What had begun as the opportunistic brush of hands against hands became a full-fledged love affair. I hope we get another chance, she thought, and sighed to head off tears. A red flash above the hatchway startled her, then flashed again. It was the studio equivalent of a doorbell that alerted each console throughout the room. It was customary to lock the studio when taping a show. Someone wants in. Whoever was out there was not one of Brood's men. She knew this because of the fear that bloomed in pale petals across Leon's face. It's Mac, she thought. It's got to be. Don't move, Leon ordered. He unsnapped his harness and pointed a commanding finger at her. I'll handle this. Your text will be on screen in a few blinks. Standard cues. I'm remote director, and you will follow my lead most carefully. He handed himself to the hatch, plugged in his headset, and pressed the intercom key. We're taping, he announced. No admittance except for studio personnel. Beatriz held her breath. Though they did seal off for tapings and live broadcast, Holovision had always encouraged an audience. Many workers aboard the orbiter enjoyed spending their free time watching her crew at work, and they had never been prohibited before. It's Spud Soleus, The high voice crackled her own headset in its characteristic way, forcing a smile to her lips. "Current control. We have an emergency situation over there. Dr. MacIntosh needs to talk with Beatriz Tatoosh right away." She felt a rush in her chest and color rising in her cheeks. Her palms continued to sweat. "She's going on the air live. Tell Dr. MacIntosh it'll have to wait." "It can't wait. Our burst line has failed and a chunk of grid's down." "We have orders," Leon said. His voice sounded hesitant. "Maybe after the show." "Dr. MacIntosh is Orbiter Command," Solius said. "He has direct orders from Flattery to open that grid now. We need your burst line for a transmission. We need Beatriz Tatoosh for advice. I'm reminding you that all power relays switch through the current control, and we can shut you down." "Wait a blink," Leon said, his voice calming. "I'll see what we can do." He switched off the intercom and pressed his forehead against the bulkhead. "Shit!" he said, and bumped his forehead against the plasteel. His headset kept him from cartwheeling backward across the studio. "Shit!" Good for Spud, Beatriz thought. He'd lied to Leon about the circuitry. Some, but not all, was routed through current control. She and MacIntosh had set up the studio, and no one knew it better. But Leon didn't know that. Besides, he had enough problems, and Leon didn't dare move without orders from Brood. He couldn't alert Brood without alerting the entire orbiter. Beatriz's heart tripped hard against her ribs, and she blotted her damp palms against the thighs of her jumpsuit. In spite of the danger, she enjoyed Leon's dilemma. Anything to make him squirm, she thought. Leon tripped the intercom switch again. "No one's coming in here until after. We can transmit on your burst line with our own carrier frequency," Spud said. "We don't even need to get in your way. Dr. MacIntosh is in charge here, and he said—" Leon slapped the switch off, unplugged his headset, and thrust himself back toward his editing cubby. He crashed, out of control, into the other two techs. They disentangled limbs and cables, then hovered over each of his shoulders and whispered together heatedly. Beatriz slipped the 2 meters to the hatch and plugged in her headset. She switched the intercom back on and left the seat to float beside the hatch only a couple of meters away. They didn't see her, and the move took fewer than 4 seconds by the big chronometer. Back at her console, Beatriz opened her comm line and punched out Mac's number. The telltale light would flash on consoles in each of the editing cubbies. She knew. As she expected, it brought Leon to her nose to nose in a red-faced fury.
"I told you not to try anything!"
Leon snapped. He was no longer the meek videotech at an editing console. Now he was ranking officer of a security assault squad that was in a tight spot.
"I'd slap the shit out of you if we didn't need your pretty face. We do have a backup plan, sister. Try that again and you'll get your own ride out the shuttle airlock. Understand?"
Beatriz had to hide a smile for the first time all day. He'd yelled at her, something that would have gone unheard elsewhere in the orbiter if she hadn't opened up the intercom first, if she hadn't plugged in the headset just a step from where Leon stood. It did not take the best of her screen abilities to feign the terror that she'd already felt many times since waking this day. "I'll do what you say," she said, as loud as she dared. "I don't want to die like the others. I'll do what you say." Leon pushed back to his companions, but before he reached them, the general alarm sounded with 4 long bursts from klaxon overhead. Though startled by the noise, Beatriz was overjoyed. She recognized the signal from exercises in the past. Those 4 blasts meant fire, total involvement, current control sector. That sector included the Holovision studio. While Leon and the other 2 flurried around the studio, asking each other,
"What the hell's going on?"
Beatriz whispered to herself, "Spud, I love you." Power, like any other living being, will go to infinite lengths to maintain itself. Ward Keel, The Apocryphal Notebooks. The first thing Rico saw when he stepped through the hatchway into the galley was the still, open-eyed form of Crista lying in her harness beside the Plaz. Her pupils pulsed with a green brightness that Rico had never noticed before, and somehow he knew that whatever she saw now was not of this world. His first impulse was to run, to lock the hatch behind him, but he checked it. Ben sprawled on the deck beside her, one hand clutching her ankle and his legs quivering like a child's in a nightmare. To Rico, the whole scene was a nightmare.
Ben!
He called from the hatchway, but Ben didn't answer. He rushed to his best friend's side and saw that Ben's eyes, too, were open. Both of them were breathing, though Crista Golly's head was bent slightly forward, and he heard a gurgle with each passage of air. Rico heeded operations warnings and didn't touch either of them.
Shit!
He snapped, and fumbled in his left breast pocket for a slap shot. It was a red, tiny ampule about the size of the end of his little finger. 2 needles jutted from one end, covered by a plastic case. He flipped the cover across the galley, careful to hold the prongs away from his own body.
Damn it, Ben! Operations said this toxin might be triggered if she got wet.
This shot was titrated for his own body weight, the one he'd most hoped never to use. In one swift jab, he stuck it into Ben's thigh.
Don't stop breathing, man, Rico begged. Just don't stop breathing.
He turned to Crista Golly, trying to control the sudden flash of anger burning in his chest. He knew it was more frustration than hate, but his body didn't know the difference.
If she killed him...
The better part of his reason wouldn't let him finish the thought. A strangled moan surged from Krista's throat, an otherworldly moan that put the hair up on the back of Rico's neck.
Crista, can you hear me?
Rico saw that she had some ability to move. She turned her hands palm upward in a gesture of helplessness, and her lips kept trying to form the words that wouldn't come. Flattery. The word was barely intelligible. She still looked straight ahead, and in a dreamlike slow motion finished her effort with, drugs.
Flattery gave you drugs?
She blinked her eyes once, slowly.
He gave you drugs to make you toxic? It's not the kelp?
Again, the slow blink and a nearly imperceptible nod. The flying fish took another lurch that sprawled Rico across the deck. He grabbed for a handhold and pressed himself against the bulkhead as the foil rolled onto its side, then righted. The foil's metal skin shrieked as something twisted it to its limits, then backed off.
The kelp's pulling us apart, he thought. It knows she's in here.
Crista was strapped in, just as Ben must have left her, soaking wet, her disguise discarded. Rico made a jump for the seat next to her and strapped in just as the foil righted again, and all was quiet. It was as though the kelp had one last spasm run through it before it could relax. He checked Ben over as best he could without touching him. He was breathing easily, and his color was good. There was some movement of his right hand toward Crista, and Rico thought this was a good sign. He gingerly opened Ben's breast pocket and brought out the other slap shot for Crista. Her eyelids did a fast flutter dance that seemed voluntary, and her left hand raised just a tiny bit at the fingertips, as though to push him away. Rico hesitated with the shot, and the fluttering stopped.
What if it's not the tingle?
He asked himself. Operations had warned him that the antidote itself might be fatal if administered needlessly to one of them. Maybe it would be fatal if given to her at all.
If Flattery's been giving her something, maybe her body's different, he thought. Maybe the antidote would kill her.
It was tempting to go ahead anyway, after what she'd done to his partner. No one would know, not even Ben. He readied himself to deliver it, and her eyes went into their flutter again, and her fingers made those pushing movements.
But Flattery would like that, he thought. There's nothing more that he would like than being able to tell the world that Her Holiness Crista Galley died in the hands of the shadows.
The whole fiction began to unreel in his mind, clearly illumined all of a sudden against the backdrop of light that began to fill the galley's plaza.
Of course, he said to her, it makes sense. He made you toxic so that no one would go near you. Then he went public and blamed this on your relationship with the kelp. Am I right?
Again, the barely perceptible nod and the slow blink. She seemed relieved, more relaxed, and he didn't think it was the toxin working. A sudden burst of light filled the galley, and the foil began to lurch rhythmically. They were on the surface, and Elvira would be going out there to clear the intakes. At each lurch, a tiny cry escaped Krista's throat, and tears streaked her cheeks. For the first time, he felt as though he wanted to comfort her. He was just beginning to imagine how much Flattery had used her, how terrible and secret her life in the preserve must have been.
She was a curiosity, a prisoner, he thought, and he made her a monster. Did this ever happen to you before Flattery gave you drugs?
Her eyes flicked side to side.
I think that he thought your toxin would kill us. Then he would get you back and be a hero, warning the world again about how dangerous you are. And if I gave you this shot,
he placed the unopened ampule carefully into his pocket,
then you would die, and he would tell the world how we killed you. That would turn the world against us for sure.
She blinked a yes, and Rico heard a moan from Ben. The intercom charged again. Then Elvira asked, "Rico, everybody okay?" Ben's mouth struggled to speak, then he gave up and managed a slight nod. Crista, too, nodded and squeezed out a slow, "Yes."
"Slapshot time," Rico said to the intercom. "They're not great, but improving. I'm all you've got right now. You going out for a little swim?"
"I thought I would. Best watch the helm."
"On my way," he said.
He reassured himself that both Crista and Ben were safe, and that neither of them could be hurt where they lay.
"I'll leave the intercom charged," he told them. "Talk to me once in a while, even if it's a grunt, okay? I'll be back when Elvira's finished out there."
Crista raised her fingertips again and wrenched out a couple of words. "Kelp. Happy."
"The kelp is happy?"
He threw his hands in the air and spoke with undisguised sarcasm.
"Then I'm happy. How the hell do you know?"
She turned her palm up like a shrug. "Freedom," she said, and repeated the word more slowly. "Freedom." A glance out the plaza showed him what appeared to be an infinite expanse of kelp lazing in the last of both afternoon suns. Alki, the small, distant sun, had begun a slow pulse almost a year ago, and it was pulsing now. A very large, very black cloud was closing from seaward toward them. An occasional kelp frond rose slowly, then fell back with a slap and a splash.
"Like a wat in a bathtub,"
he thought. He had never seen the kelp play like this before.
"I hope you're right," he said. "I truly hope you're right. It will make life so much easier for us and so much harder for Flattery's people."
He resisted the temptation to pat her shoulder and Ben's.
"We're going to get you out of this, buddy," he said to Ben.
He kept talking, more to himself than to Ben, as he hurried out the hatchway to the helm. He spoke to Ben over the intercom as he reviewed his instruments, as much for his own comfort as his partner's.
"I hate to say it," Rico said, "but I think current control saved our butts. The kelp got us down here, wherever here is, and then started tearing at the cabin with those huge vines. Current control must have been trying to get the original channel back because the kelp was obviously fighting some kind of impulse. Either they blew a fuse or they gave the kelp its head completely. Whatever, it was the right thing to do."
He resumed his instrument checkout.
"That electrical pulse through the kelp must have screwed up our navcom system." Rico said. Most everything looks okay. I closed off cooling outlets to the galley to head off that leak, just in case it's ready to pop someplace else. You two might get a little warm there between the engines. Once we're airborne, I'll figure a way to get you both up here.
He finished the checkout and realized that they wouldn't be getting airborne after all. Not unless Elvira could remanufacture the hydraulics that withdrew the hydrofoils and extended airfoils.
Ben doesn't need to know that now, he thought. For that matter, neither do I. Speak to me, buddy. Anything.
Rico, okay. It came out loud and clear, though painfully slow, but it was enough to put a smile on Rico's face. He felt Elvira tugging kelp out of the inlets and tried the navcom again. It was dead, not even a burst of static from the speakers.
Squall's coming in, he told Ben. Things might get rough again pretty soon.
He didn't want to tell Ben that they were going to get really rough now that they couldn't get above the storm. Without the navcom and without the kelp glutting up the ocean as far as the eye could see, Rico himself didn't want to think about how rough it was going to get.
Anyone who threatens the mind or its symbolizing endangers the matrix of humanity itself.
Ward Keel, The Apocryphal Notebooks. Ben had heard the boat's ballast blow as he stroked Krista's hair and cheek under the fine spray of the pinpoint galley leak. He remembered the taste of salt when his lips brushed her hair. Because of the taste of salt from the interior bulkhead, he knew it was a cooling pipe leak, recycled seawater, nothing to worry about now that they were headed topside. He remembered that he and Crista had been talking, laughing, when suddenly his upper body began to tingle. His neck wouldn't move his head where it wanted to go. He tried to cry out, but his mouth and throat wouldn't work. Crista slumped against her harness, limp, her eyes wide with fear and their green irises darkening nearly to blue. Oh no, he remembered thinking. Oh no, they were right. In lurching, spastic movements, he lunged against Crista, sprawling across her legs. She had let out a little cry of surprise, but didn't resist. Ben saw that she couldn't. Whatever was happening to him was also happening to her. He had the advantage of more body mass, more muscle, so it was taking his body longer to shut down. He grabbed for Krista's harness to pull himself up, but his hands turned to two heavy rocks at the end of his arms. Within a blink, he collapsed against her. He was able to see and breathe, but trying to move only produced uncontrollable spasms. He slid down the couch to the deck into a position that didn't allow him to watch Crista. One of his hands remained on her ankle, and he felt her body spasm and relax much like his own. The antidote was in his pocket, and he couldn't make his body work well enough to dig it out. Rico will think I'm a fool, he thought. Now that they'd lost their navcom, they couldn't function undersea, and they'd be bobbing squawks on the surface. Rico would have his hands full enough without this mess. Elvira's got a few tricks, he thought. Ben felt the tingle rush like a hot blush down his back, out his shoulders and thighs. He tried to control his muscles again, but couldn't. He was a helpless, quivering heap on the deck. He remembered feeling more betrayed than careless. Then he started traveling the convolutions of Krista's mind. Rico, the galley around them, the rest of their real universe played through a dark curtain that backdropped Krista's thoughts and memories. These images from her life unreeled in his brain.
Ben!
Rico said, his small voice rising to Ben from a great depth. He said more, but Ben heard only the snap of the antidote against his single suit. He felt nothing but the tingle throughout his body, but he was fully aware of Rico stretching him out on the deck. Time rippled like a dark fabric strung between himself and Rico. The white and stainless steel of the galley blended into a great glowing halo of yellow panel that washed out everything behind the curtain of his mind. Ben understood much now. A near infinity of human memories slept in Crista Golly's head. Now many of them buzzed in his own, like solvent to solute, a wet solution filling up a dry. He felt the dry blossom of his mind unfold as it drank, petal by intricate petal, and behind it the shadow that was Rico Lapouche rippled back and forth. Though he could see and hear, Ben felt a detachment from his body that was more curiosity to him than fear. He remembered the special show he'd done with Beatriz about people who returned from near death, what they'd reported about this same detached feeling, this same comforting warmth that replaced all sensation in his skin except that tingle. They said they'd viewed their bodies from certain vantage points in the room, watched the medics resuscitate them, remembered whole conversations that took place even when they showed no heartbeat on the monitor. They described watching the vital signs monitor with the same detached feeling that Ben had when he slumped to the deck. His view, however, was distinctly from someone else's body, someone else's mind. This was a Watt's mind down under, looking upward toward the sun from the middle depths of a kelp lagoon. His range of vision was limited to straight ahead. It was slightly blurry, and a light halo surrounded the rim above. Way up there, backlit by the glowing suns, he saw Rico's busy shadow. The lagoon was full of swimmers, those legendary guild humans, undulating in and out of channels above her. This was Crista as a child. This was Ben as Crista as a child. He sensed that Rico was very worried, and he wanted to tell him, "It's okay, I'm here," but nothing would come out. One swimmer in particular attended to her. An older female. Ben had never seen a swimmer. He'd imagined them as grotesque, slimy creatures with wide mouths and stupid eyes, and rudimentary rat-like tails. The female who attended Crista now was about his own age. Her red fan of gill fluttered furiously at her shoulders as she fed the girl slices of raw fish. Crista dangled from the kelp, and the swimmer female came up to her from the deeps. She did not, or would not, speak. From somewhere behind the halo, very far above Ben's upturned face, Rico's voice echoed, "I'm going to settle you here and keep you warm." Ben felt the lagoon receding, and Rico's voice with it.
Crista is still breathing, Rico said. I don't know whether you can hear me or not, Ben, but we'll get you out of here. You'll be okay. The goddamn girl is okay. We're almost topside. We'll get you someplace.
Rico's voice was tinged with hysteria, and he sounded close to tears.
We'll get you someplace, buddy. You just hang on.
A squeeze at his shoulder, then Rico was gone. Ben found he could leave the womb-like kelp, and if he imagined... there we go. Ben found he could leave the womb-like kelp, and if he imagined walking a corridor toward himself, he became more aware of the galley, the foil around him. He felt he could walk a gossamer bridge between Crista's mind and his own. A sudden dazzle of light in the galley and a change in the pitch of the foil told Ben that they had surfaced. Ben wondered whether he would die this way, fully conscious, feeling that last exhalation and unable to suck in air. He remembered the time that he and Rico almost drowned, when Guimi's island was sabotaged and sunk. He had nearly panicked then, but he felt no such panic now, simply a numb obedience to his fate. He found himself wondering about things that should terrify him. Would the neurotoxin, whatever it was, paralyze his breathing muscles? His heart muscle? He wished that Rico had propped him up a little to make it easier, though already the tingling had stopped. The slapshot works, he thought. He wanted to cross that gossamer bridge to Crista again, but he felt himself moving farther away from the bridge and back into the foil. The deck under him was uncomfortable, and he had found that he could squirm a little to change position. He was definitely improving. He'd been dimly aware of a voice coming in over the intercom. It was Rico's voice, and it came in again, sounding worried.
"Speak to me, buddy. Anything."
Ben tried his throat again. It was dry and didn't want to work quite right, but he managed to squeeze out,
"Rico, you okay?"
He heard Crista breathing, but she still hadn't stirred. I wonder what happens to her.
"Squall's coming in," Rico announced. "Things might get rough again pretty soon."
Things might get rough again pretty soon. Ben wanted to laugh, tried to come back at Rico with, "Rough? What do you call this?" But it all came out a garble. Oh, I'll be able to get in an extra chapter today, I think.
The new ruler must inevitably distress those over whom he establishes his rule. So it happens that he makes enemies of all those whom he has injured in occupying the new principality, and yet he cannot keep the friendship of those who have set him up.
Machiavelli, the Prince. Flattery spurned the safety of his quarters for a brazen tour in the sunshine topside. Nevi and Zentz were on their mission and out of his way. The ragtag rebellion was failing under his security force, and he knew that whoever had Cristagali had a big handful of trouble. He smiled widely to himself and turned his face to the sky. He loved the sky, the weather, how different from the controlled susurrations of moon-base air. It was nearly time for the afternoon rain. Like the few other survivors of hibernation who had been reared in the sterility of Moonbase, Flattery had a feeling for weather. He chose a parapet that looked down coast, across the preserve and into the wretched village that spilled from his gate. A boil of black smoke fanned inland with the upcoming wind. Flattery wore his brightest red lounging jacket so that the vermin could see he was very much alive, still very much the director. So close to the borders of battle, now they would see the metal they tested. The presence of two suns unnerved him, even after these many years. Information from his kelp studies, from his geologists, proved that they were ripping the planet's crust like so much flatbread. The worst was yet to come, and he didn't intend to wait around for it. Ventana, one of his messengers, approached the walkway below him.
"Reports on the Kelpway disruption, sir."
She waved to a messenger. He signaled one of the guards, who inspected the device and then brought it to him. Flattery pulled his white hat farther down to shade his forehead. The white-brimmed style was islander for political effect. It was a white hat because Flattery believed that white placed him on the side of truth and justice at a glance. He did not retrieve the reports immediately. He knew what was inside. Nothing. And by this time the afternoon cloud cover obscured an orbiter view of the number 8 sector. His passion for weather did not include the sun's ravages of his uncooperative skin. 2 pink blotches peeled on his forehead, and Flattery tried not to scratch them. His personal physician had removed 2 such spots only a month ago, and now this. "The people have to see me," he thought. "There is no substitute for the proper exposure." His 3 most trusted bodyguards accompanied him at a distance, their Pandoran instincts keeping them ever on the move. His vantage point was a bluff overlooking the compound, the village, and the bay. To his back were only the higher points for many clicks. the high reaches, home of the worthless Zavatans. A lot of these Zavatans, like the peasantry, believed in ship and the eventual return of this ship as some sort of mechanical messiah. The thought made him laugh, and his guards looked at him curiously. "Stand down, gentlemen," he told them. "As you can see, there's nothing down there that can reach us." "Begging the directors a pardon," one of the guards, Almach, spoke up. "It's my job never to stand down." Flattery nodded his approval. "This one bears watching." "Very good," he said. "I appreciate your dedication." Almach, a merman from good stock, didn't swell with the praise. He was already back to scanning the area for movement. "Nothing up here but Zavatans." "Nothing up here but Zavatans," Flattery said. "Are you sure they're nothing, sir?" Almach replied. This was the first time his guard had offered a comment in his 10-month tour of service at Flattery's side. Flattery merely grunted a response. He had his suspicions about these Zavatans, always the same number of them appearing about, but seldom the same faces. Flattery was no fool. He was, after all, a chaplain psychiatrist, and had done impeccable study in the history of oppressed religions. He was uncomfortable with a nearby population that was potentially hostile, whose numbers seemed impossible to determine, and whose general fitness appeared far better than that of most of his security. "They actually run up these cliffs," he mused. "Why?" It was here, on the bare overlook above the preserve, that he reviewed the latest messages regarding the holovision foil and the curious rebellion of the largest stand of kelp in the region. "So, Marta, do you really believe that they've turned back?" he asked. His communications officer, a little plump for her regulation blue jumpsuit, managed a quick chew at her lip before responding. Flattery had bedded her once and recalled that her touch was far more satisfying than her looks. She'd been a slender young thing then, 4, maybe 5 years ago. She had started as a bodyguard, but showed a facility with electronics that impressed his engineers. When she requested a transfer, he had granted it. It was just as well. The move headed off the rumors and the inevitable discomfort of extracting himself from a sticky personal situation. I don't know," she said. "The device that I placed personally on their foil is working perfectly, and its course is consistent with a return to this—"
"Bah!" Flattery blurted. "They're not stupid. I insisted that you place the device on or inside her person, and you took it upon yourself to place it elsewhere. A current control outpost has already confirmed the device to be aboard a crippled sub-train dragging a few thousand kilos of dead fish." Flattery enjoyed the stunned look that flattened her face. She looked small and pale now. "I was afraid," she said. "I was afraid to touch her." Marta hung her head as though expecting a blade. The merciless suns here on the bluff widened the circles of sweat forming under her armpits. It was that heavy, sticky time on the coast just before the rain squalls hit. He didn't have to sniff to smell the rain. Flattery remembered that time with her. It had been afternoon, and their skin poured sweat. Tiny black hairs from his chest had stuck to her small white breasts. She hadn't been so afraid of him then, just a little bit in awe, which made things easier. "Damn it," he muttered to himself, "bitten by the fiction again." He drew himself up to his full height, nearly 2 heads taller than Marta. "Didn't I assure you that it was safe?" This he delivered in his most consoling voice. "Didn't I assure you that it was safe?" Much better. She nodded, but still did not lift her head. Flattery was very pleased with himself. If this woman who knew him so well was afraid of Crista, of what her touch might do, then these strangers must be terrified. Thanks to his foresight in the beginning and her daily medications, Crista should be withdrawing violently by now, exhibiting the very symptoms attributed to her touch. Perhaps by now she'd be catatonic,
something else he'd engineered to see that she was brought back to him. The neurotoxin would be oozing from her every pore by now, and the fiction he had laid down so carefully for so long would become true. Everyone, particularly the enemy, would see it with their own eyes. Only he, the director, could save her. Those shadows would soon find themselves in the presence of a monster that they could not afford to keep. The wonders of chemistry, he thought, and smiled. Aloud, he reassured Marta. I understand your fear, he said. The important thing is that we were not fooled by their amateurish attempt at deception. What do you have to report on damage here? Both of them flinched at the simultaneous crackle of two laser guns, and Flattery turned to see that his guards had cooked a pair of hooded dashers closing from the direction of the high reaches. I wonder... He didn't finish the rest aloud. What he wondered was whether or not the Zavatans were training dashers. I want your studies on dasher sightings coordinated with known Zavatan positions, he said. Marta nodded and unholstered the electronic link at her side. The movement drew a subtle shift in Almach's position. Marta didn't notice that his lasgun muzzle had focused on her head before the link cleared daylight. She clicked out her coded entry in her usual unhurried manner. Flattery knew something of the Zavatans and their history, but not nearly as much as he'd like. They were patient, organized, and they scavenged everything. If rumor was correct, they grew illicit crops in the up-coast regions and distributed them among refugees. Flattery resented this because it seriously weakened his bargaining position with the masses. He did not have the manpower to police thousands of square kilometers of rugged countryside and complete Project Voidship at the same time. Project Voidship was infinitely more important. He saluted approval as one of the men went over the wall to fetch the dasher skins. That much less for the Zavatans, he thought. He made a mental note to see what the lab would have to say about where the dashers had been, with whom, and what they were eating, when, and why. And your report on the fighting? He asked. Compound perimeter is secure, she said. Marta pressed the spot behind her right ear that activated the receive mode of her message implant. I'm getting a lot of interference here, don't know the cause. Minimal damage to the compound. The expected rubble, but mostly cosmetic as usual. Rocks and sticks are no match for lasguns. Prisoners are being held in the courtyard. She paused as more information fed into her messenger. Reports on the power station, the ferry terminal, and the grid situation, he ordered. Marta fed something into her messenger, then her expression changed. The facade of the impartial reporter wrinkled into concern at her brow, and she leaned forward as information vibrated her mastoid bone, washed through the fluids and hairs of her inner ear to her brain. There is a massive force congregating at the power station, she said. The squad of security that attacked our detachment at the site has dug in and persisted. The refugee camp is less than a kilometre away. People from the camp are backing up the rebel squad just out of lasgun range of our defence. Operation H, Flattery barked. If they keep coming, have air support shift to the camp. Marta paled further. She lowered her voice so that the guards wouldn't hear. Operation H, sir. They didn't see it from the camp. If you jelly the attackers, witnesses will know it wasn't highlighter. Use an LTA, he said. We have a few balloons in the hangar that look like highlighters. Get them into the air. We'll worry about witnesses later. I want that squad burned. I want anyone backing them up burned. Is that understood? Marta nodded, and her fingers flickered the orders across her instrument. The ferries? The ferries? Operational, sir. The current shift reported on time. Casualties high, but replacements are already on site receiving training. The OMC launch lit off and docked at Orbiter Station, no update. Current control terminated their signal to the kelp in Sector 8, but there is no grid. But no aggressive activity. Terminated? Flattery regretted the lie to MacIntosh. He was sure that the kelp would yield, given the full electrical prod long enough. He had never thought that MacIntosh would terminate the signal.
Idiot! What could he be thinking, giving the kelp its head? Doesn't he know how much we need those kelpways open?
He inhaled one long, slow breath, half in the left nostril, half in the right. He let it out just as slowly.
Is it working?
He asked. A few merchant vessels lost, she said. Most have surfaced, making repairs. They will not fare well in the storm.
Order Dr. MacIntosh to re-establish the kelpways, or I will do it my way from here. He has 1 hour.
Yes, sir. Flattery's mood blackened. 2 small explosions and a flash came out from the center of Calalach. He signaled one of his guards.
Have security get what they can from the leaders of this rabble. I don't expect much. Then have the rest of them staked in the open.
He surveyed the cliffside behind him and that led to the high reaches.
Have them staked up there, he said, so that everyone below can study the results of their decision in detail. It shouldn't take long.
It was what Marta had told him about the kelp that interested him the most. He'd fabricated such an intricate web of deception about Crista and about her. He'd fabricated such an intricate web of deception about Crista that Flattery himself had difficulty remembering which was his masterful illusion and which was reality. His earliest warnings to keep her from any contact with the kelp was based more on hunch than data, but it was clear to him now that his hunch had been good.
The kelp could actually smell her.
I ordered current control to opt for a surgical solution, Marta said. They have 1 hour to achieve the grid by any other means. I explained that there were too many subs at stake.
Will it be necessary to dissect the entire stand?
No, she said. Like the mob, it should convert easily with minimal damage to the affected area. That corridor will not have the flexibility it once had, but it'll be navigable as soon as the debris is swept.
When it's over, have samples sent to the lab, he said. Complete analysis. Find out why it could resist current control, then render it down for the toxin stockpile.
The Zavatans, she began. It would be good politics to
give them what's left of the kelp? He snorted in disgust. Let them dredge their own. I don't want to be party to their heresy. And I want a lot of toxin on hand. I have surprise yet for those vermin, as Nevi calls them.
Marta noted the orders into the messenger at her waist. It was clear to Flattery that the kelp must have sensed Crista presence. How else to explain this rebellion? It had occurred along the plotted route of Ozette's foil after Marta's device was jettisoned.
The kelp must have sensed her when the bug hit the water, he thought.
He smiled again, partly out of distant relief at not being aboard the flying fish at the time, but largely at the predicament that now embroiled Ozette and his shadows.
Overflights?
He asked. Bad weather already in, she replied. No probability of contact, high probability of loss. 2 grasshoppers available in the area, but they are frail and of limited range. Do you have orders for them?
Observation patterns as weather permits, he said. I want to see who they turn to when they're in big trouble. Nevi will be on the scene soon enough.
Flattery detected a definite shudder across Marta's shoulders at the mention of Nevi's name.
That's why I use him, he thought. Mere mention of his name gets results.
He dismissed Marta and surveyed the landscape. His landscape that fell away before him. Metallic-looking wehi glinted sunlight back at him, their short, dagger-like leaves deployed toward the bursts of ultraviolet pulsing from Alki. Flattery admired this dangerous little plant for its tenacity and for the protection it afforded his compound. Its seeds lay dormant undersea for 2 centuries, waiting to flourish when the oceans rolled back again. It flourished now, and made going difficult for predators near the compound. human or otherwise. A rob of tiny swift grazers darted among the weehee to his left, near the cliff's rise to the high reaches. Though reputed to eat anything softer than rock, the grazers preferred to avoid humans. They had survived, like many earthside rodents, by hiding aboard the organic islands throughout the floods. The poor often chanced netting them for food, a dangerous task. He'd watched an old islander swarmed to death on this very spot only 2 years ago. The man had netted only half the rob. The other half waited in the rocks for his return, then set upon his legs until he fell. It was over in a matter of blinks, and Flattery considered it an education. He ordered the whole rob burned out at the nests, of course, and their charred bodies delivered to the villagers. Strictly political. The director knew that anything that protected itself to that extreme could be made to protect him, too. His greenskeeper had a way with animals as well as plants, and now several rob of swift grazers nested in vulnerable approach points to the compound. This was one such rob, stationed near the trail to the high reaches. He watched them often, particularly in the evening when their slender, rusty backs caught the sunlight and rippled among the silver weehee.
Look there!
His guard warned, and Flattery saw the skulking back of a dasher approach the rob. The guard set his laser gun for the distance about the limit to his effective... Oh, Jesus. My brain just misread that whole thing. The guard set his laser gun for the distance about the limit of his effective range and raised it. Flattery motioned him to wait. The dasher closed the final 20 meters in 3 blurring bounds, slapping at the little animals and stunning them. There were too many, and the dasher was skinny from hunger. It tried to gulp a few of them down, but the pause was all the rob needed to regroup. The dasher seemed to melt off its odd bones. Flattery smiled again as the afternoon clouds gathered offshore. "Beautiful, aren't they?" he asked no one. "Just beautiful."
We're more than our ideas.
Prudence Lawn Wagand, MD number 5. Original crew, Void Ship Earthling. Twisp the Zavatan Elder watched the director watch the swift grazers strip an ailing hooded dasher to bone. The sight reminded him of the old days when he was a simple fisherman at sea. The last effects of blue spore dust heightened this memory of schools of scrat that devoured a maki 1,000 times their size in blinks. Twisp had a healthy respect for scrat and for swift grazers. Furry little bandits, he thought. One thing about them always made him smile. Their fragile little penises detached during mating, leaving a small fleshy plug in the female that her body absorbed. It kept sperm in and subsequent suitors out, guaranteeing the genetic survival of the first to mount. The male grew another within weeks, but not soon enough to breed twice in one cycle. Something of a game developed among many Pandoran men at the expense of the swift grazers. The trick was to trap a swift grazer and snatch its penis. They were considered a delicacy, and it was said that the director enjoyed them steamed atop his salads. It wasn't easy to isolate a single swift grazer. Many a drunk pulled back stumps where there had been fingers. The little animals looked like a band of robbers, with their masks across their twitchy noses and their nervous way of having at least half of the rob on alert. He had never known them to attack humans unless molested. But when they attacked, it was with a fury, a complete abandon that chilled him. He did not care to find out the limits of their patience. Twisp admired swift grazers for the way they stuck together. There was no such thing as a hungry swifty. If one swifty was hungry, the whole rob was hungry. The Shadows claimed that the people of Pandora would be like swift grazers when the time came. "The time is now," Twisp whispered, watching Flattery. His whisper was swallowed in the wind. Just enough spore dust twinkled in his veins to lend a background music to the gusts of the incoming storm. The wind whistled back, "Yes," here in the high places, as it always did at sea. Only inside, behind the plas and dogged hatches, did he ever hear it moan, "No." The first time had been nearly 30 years ago, in the company of a woman he couldn't forget. The wind had been right then, and Twisp's broad shoulders sagged a little when he realized it was right now. The rob of Swifties finished their kill. Most of them stood upright on their slender bodies, sniffing the wind and yawning. The pink of their long tongues flickered visibly as they licked their rusty snouts. Twisp trained his monks with Scrat and swift grazers in mind. The sequestered Zavatans, like the Shadows of every settlement, were honed and ready, prepared to fight, prepared to go hungry. Still, he desperately wanted to find another way. He asked the wind, "How can I save the people and Flattery, too?" A crisp lull stilled the afternoon. Twisp had long ago noted that the director cultivated certain rob and eliminated others. Careful observation bore fruit. Twisp knew all of the swift grazers' secret warrens and the myriad entrances topside. It was this kind of patience and attention to detail that he knew they would all need to turn aside the cruel momentum of Flattery and his machine. Beyond the scene of this little death in front of him, the greater deaths of charred villagers fanned out from the smoking ruins of the preserve. As the afternoon winds once again gathered their storm, so did hunger unite Pandora against its most vicious enemy. Twisp watched clumps of the inevitable refugees stagger the trail to the rumor of safety among the Zavatans in the high reaches. "New recruits for us, for the Shadows." His smile was a grim one. Pandorans had never been a warlike lot. There had always been too few humans, too many demons. Even hungry as they were, Pandorans were reluctant to pick up arms against their fellows. Flattery paid his security force, and paid them well, to fight other humans. The disease that Twisp thought he had nipped years ago had burst into an epidemic under Flattery. "I, too, believed him at first," Twisp said. "Was that wrong?" He knew what the wind would say before he heard it. He had been lazy. He had hoped someone else would take care of it. Like everyone else, he had only wanted to live his simple life quietly. Twisp's own patience was worn threadbare as his robe. For nearly 25 years he had hoped that Pandora would shrug off the director's mantle of hunger and fear. Hope, he knew, had even less substance than dreams. It implied waiting, and too many hungry Pandorans didn't have the luxury of waiting. It was a death sentence, and time was the prosecution. When Flattery had seized power, he insinuated himself first into control of Merman Mercantile, and then acquired control of all food distribution. He bought into transportation and communications worldwide. This had been accomplished by the deaths of several of Twisp's friends, people who had owned Merman Mercantile and current control. Too many accidents, too many coincidences. He fought a familiar lump at his throat. They all had been young, naive, and none of them stood a chance against the cunning of the director. Now, as always, only Flattery could afford to wait. How ironic, Twisp thought, that those who can afford to wait don't have to. I wonder if there's anything left for him to hope for.
"Elder!"
Twisp cringed inwardly at the panting voice of the young Mose behind him. He felt impatience enough bursting in his breast without being nettled by Mose.
What is it?
The younger monk would not approach the precipitous edge of rock outcrop that Twisp occupied, this he knew. He admitted to himself that it was a little game he played with Mose.
"Why do you stand out there?"
the younger asked, his voice tinged with a whine.
Why do you stand back there?
Still, Twisp did not turn, though he knew he would do so.
"Your presence is requested in chambers. It is urgent. There are many preparations afoot that I do not understand."
Twisp did not answer.
"Elder, can you hear me?"
Still no answer.
"Elder, please do not make me come out there again. You know that it shakes my wattles in a fearsome way."
Twisp chuckled to himself and turned to join Mose at the cavern entrance. The afternoon rains had begun, anyway, patterning. The afternoon rains had begun anyway, pattering like swift grazers in the scrub. He knew already what operations must have decided, that it was time to stop hoping, that Flattery and his kind must go, that the people were rising up unorganized and undefended, that the Zavatans and the Shadows held the only means and position to guarantee his fall, that once again thousands would die in the greater name of life and, of course, liberty. When there was nothing else to boil down, it always boiled down to hunger.
"Come with me to operations," Twisp said, "and I'll show you something to pink your wattles. You will then be witness to something fearsome indeed."
Twisp bowed once at the cavern entrance, in respect, and entered, the billow of his orange robe a beacon against the darkened afternoon. The dim vestibule inside was guarded by two young novices with shaved heads and laser guns. The boy looked to be about 15, and his shaved head revealed a high crest of bone atop his skull, which made him taller than Twisp, though their eyes met at the same height. Both he and the girl wore the black, armored jumpsuits of the Dasher clan. Both were suitably alert, their quick brown eyes negating their relaxed posture. Together they swung the plasteel hatch outward on its gimbals and admitted the two monks to the cavern within the high reaches. It was not Dashers and Flatwings that these doors walled out, but the director and his Vachon security force. Through the years, Twisp himself had become a master of security. Incursions by VSF had been few and unsuccessful. They viewed the Zavatans as harmless, spineless weaklings who were kelp-drugged or insane.
"Illusion is our strongest weapon,"
Twisp had lectured the young novices.
"Appear to be foolish, mad, poor, and ugly. Who would want to take you then? Note how the mold wins the fruit by its appearance alone."
The first chamber was the one that was inspected periodically by Vachon's security force. Rough-hewn out of rock, it housed 300 Zavatans of the 9 clans spread out along the walls, with common meeting and dining areas. There were mazes of cubbies in 3 levels, hung with hundreds of tapestries that helped muffle the din of 300 voices echoing inside the cavern. Lighting was the usual hot glow type driven by 4 hydrogen generators housed in the rock beneath them. The appearance was of primitive squalor, and security inspectors, sent here by the director, seldom stayed for more than a cursory look. This was where Mose lived. Twisp, too, had a cubby here, 3rd level to the right of the main entrance, but he seldom slept there. For more than a year, Twisp had lived in the private chambers of the group known to the Shadows as Operations. Twisp ascended to the 2nd level with Mose in tow. He stepped behind an old islander tapestry into an alcove that would not be noticed except perhaps by children at play. He approached an undamaged section of basalt bulkhead carved with elaborate histories of human and kelp interactions. The section that he faced, titled The Lazarus Effect... Sorry. Goofiest, silliest laugh.
Also a goofy reference, but hey, why not name drop? The section that he faced, titled The Lazarus Effect, was simply a huge bas-relief figure of a human hand, index finger extended, touching a strand of kelp that rose from the sea. Twisp pulled the finger out from the bulkhead, and, with the snick of a dagger leaving its sheath, a section of rock sprang outward. When operations met for Zavatan business, they met inside this labyrinth of rock. Its many repairs betrayed the instability of Pandora's geology, and its routes were constantly changing. Few knew the passageways, and not as well as the islander Twisp, chief of operations. Mose swallowed hard and paled conspicuously. There were tales of thousands of villagers and common folk who sought safety among the Zavatans, never to be seen again. Mose himself had seen hundreds come into the great cavern behind them who had never come out. Operations referred to them as messengers from the poor, and hinted that they were relocated worldwide. Though Mose had heard this rumor, he had never seen evidence to back it up. Mose seldom admitted that he'd been born and lived out his meager years within 5 kilometers of where he now stood.
They never come back out this hatch.
Twisp smiled at the younger monk's obvious fear. Why do I like teasing him? He wondered. I remember Brett took it so well. He shook his head. Dwelling on his dead partner was non-productive. Cleaning up the nest of assassins who'd killed him would do everybody some good. Come, Twisp said. You'll be safe with me. It is time the Zavatan muscle flexed itself. With a smile, Twisp stepped into the well-lighted passageway. Mose's eyes couldn't have widened further. When he hesitated, Twisp placed a large hand on his shoulder. Mose, too, stepped inside, and the panel snicked shut behind them. I want you to remember everything you see here today. Mose swallowed hard again and nodded.
Yes, Elder.
Mose did not look thrilled. His already pale face was drawn tight. The surgical scars along his hairline and neck glowed an angry pink. He alternately pulled at his robe and wrung his hands. The raw silence of this stone passageway contrasted heavily with the steady din of the cavern they left behind them. The passageway was lighted by a cold source, neither bright nor dim, and it carried the pale green hues of merman design. As in many merman complexes, the walls met at right angles in a precision that annoyed many islanders. These walls were carved by a plasteel welder, and except for fault damage, they ran perfectly straight, perfectly smooth. An electronic voice from overhead startled Mose.
Security code for companion.
1-3, Twisp said.
Continue.
They set out down the passageway, and Mose asked,
Where are we?
You will see.
What do they mean, security code?
We have checks within checks, Twisp explained. Had you been an enemy holding me hostage, this passage would have been sealed off with both of us in it. Perhaps I would be rescued, perhaps not. You, at least, would have been killed.
Twisp felt Mose walk closer to him yet.
Operations is far beneath us, even below the ocean floor.
Merman did this?
Mose asked. The passageway turned left abruptly and ended at a blank wall. Twisp pressed his palm to a depression on the wall, and a panel slid back to reveal a tiny room, barely large enough for a half-dozen people. Humans did this, Twisp answered. Islanders and mermen alike. The panel slid shut behind them. Twisp spoke the single word, operations, and the room began to descend with the two of them inside.
Oh, Elder!
Mose held on to Twisp's long arm. Don't be afraid, Twisp said. There is no magic here. You will see many wonders, all human wonders. Our brothers and sisters will know of them presently. Didn't I say this would pink your wattles? At this, Mose laughed, but he continued to clutch Twisp's arm throughout their rapid descent. And that, I think, is where I have to call it for today.
Yes, I do. I have some things I need to get done.
Hopefully people enjoyed. The book is rolling along now at pace. Things are going to be pretty breakneck sooner rather than later. Let's see. Actually, we might be able to bang this puppy out in 2 streams. Might indeed. It could be that that will be the case. Anyway, stuff's moving along. We've got people fighting for liberty and freedom against tyranny. Wound up being unexpectedly fortuitous and prescient of me for starting the series, so it would end around the time in real time when it is ending. So, due to current events. So yeah, that'll about do it for this week. Next week we will continue reading through the Ascension Factor on Friday, 40,000 in Gehenna on Wednesday, and Full Metal Panic Book 5 on Monday. We will proceed as scheduled. I don't think there's anything coming up in the immediate future that's going to keep that from occurring. So yeah, we should still be very much on schedule to have started at least The Night Land by William Hope Hodgson by the end of October. So that will work out handily. In fact, we'll get some of it on Halloween even. That will in fact be one of the days. The day of Halloween. Let's see, when it's on a Thursday, so there's nothing to worry about there. When does Christmas show up? That's also on a Thursday. So yeah, no issues for scheduling for the foreseeable. There'll be probably some Monday floating around early next year that I'll forget about completely, that I won't be around for due to work. But other than that, hopefully people have a nice weekend. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other, and fight tyranny and oppression wherever you see it, as best you can and as safely as you can. The thing is to keep fighting. Yes, that is a sentiment that is probably going to be unpopular with some folks, and I am so sorry to hear that. But we live in interesting times, and not the good kind. Human history has seen this stuff before, and we've gotten through it. Usually, it's been pretty ugly. I'd prefer it not be so ugly this go-round, but I'm not holding my breath. Anyway, with that, let's go. I'm gonna run. Hope you all have a good one. On that tremendously uplifting note. Anyway, I'll see you all later. Toodaloo!